Welcome to Nitte, a place where learning goes way beyond the classroom. For some, it's home. For some, it's a step towards transformation. For some, it's the beginning of a wonderful journey with like-minded people.
Thanks to the teaching and mentoring activities and dynamic incubation center, I am now industry ready.
Engineering at Nitte includes aeronautical, civil, computer science, electrical and electronics, electronics and communication, information science, mechanical, biotechnology, MTech, MCA and PhD. Nitte also collaborates with reputed universities around the world to give students an international academic exposure.
At Nitte, the focus on research has not only helped me understand my subjects, but reach for the stars.
Nitte offers a unique co-op program and exposure to architects, artisans and urban designers.
I aspire to be the heart of progress.
Chema is listed in the World Directory of Medical Schools.
I learned the art of helping people smile.
A.B. Shetty Dental College is listed as one of the top dental colleges in the country. Justice K.S. Hegde Charitable Hospital, part of the Nitte Group, has 1,000 beds, advanced labs and diagnostic centers, which attract a good number of patients from across South India. Along with teaching and clinical practices, we offer programs in pharmacy, nursing, physiotherapy, speech and hearing, biomedical sciences, and paramedical programs like respiratory therapy technology, operation theatre technology, medical imaging technology, and medical laboratory technology.
I've always been curious about the chemistry of cures. I help in healing. From toddlers to seniors, I care for them all.
I believe I can help improve the quality of other people's lives.
We are blessed with the ability to speak and hear from birth. Not everyone is as lucky. I want to do my bit to help the less fortunate. I am proud to be able to assist a surgeon in the operation theatre.
From simple X-rays to sophisticated MRI and PET scans,
my course trains me to assist radiologists and physicians. The training I have received in testing blood, tissues and body fluids assures me a job at any clinical laboratory. I I help people enjoy every breath.
I believe in the power of research to change the world.
Nuxer is a one-of-its-kind teaching and research center that addresses society's health needs through painstaking research in biomedical sciences, food safety, microbiology, and biotechnology.
What I learn here and at my internship in the University of Minnesota, USA, I will carry with me and teach my community to live healthy and stay happy. We believe in being our own bosses.
The Bloomberg Lab helps students stay up to date with the latest trends in global markets. Students also have access to Bloomberg Analytics and can, in the course of their learning, develop their own analytics.
I cook my own recipe for success.
Sarosh Institute of Hotel Administration molds each student to become perfect hospitality professionals. A healthy blend of polish and panache.
I speak for the voiceless. This is what I'm taught, and this is what I'll practice.
I design my dreams and my goals.
I measure success by the trends I inspire.
Bachelors in Fashion Technology at Nitte offer students state-of-the-art labs and the space to get their creative juices flowing. With the best of infrastructure, an active placement cell, and a lively atmosphere, education at Nitte helps students grow, breathe, and bloom. Graduate into a better future. Graduate with Nitte. Welcome to Nitte, a place where learning goes way beyond the classroom. For some, it's home.
I'm Vivek Pai. Start.
For some,
I'm
it's
Vivek
a
Pai,
step towards transformation.
Institution Innovation Council. I'm delighted to initiate today's event by wishing all present here today a very good afternoon. Dear friends and our esteemed panel, we are all in the midst of unprecedented difficult times. COVID-19 has a role of human lives, economy, education, and almost every aspect of our lives, and is still looming large. While there is no denying the fact that our healthcare system is under severe stress, it is the false narratives and fake stories being aired and broadcast on TV, print, and social media that is causing even more damage and panic. Institution Innovation Council of therefore thought it important to call for a panel discussion to discuss these issues and send the right message across to the student fraternity in particular and the society at large in general. So our topic of today's panel discussion is medical oxygen, issues and way forward. To discuss this topic, we have with us the right mix of experts from both the institution as well as the industry. So now I invite our president of Institution Innovation Council of Nitte University, Dr. G. Sriniketan, to start the proceedings. Sriniketan sir, over to you sir.
Good afternoon to all of you, respected and honorable Vice Chancellor and Chairman of this panel, members of the panel, members of the Institution Innovation Council and Nitte deemed University family, invitees and friends. It's my pleasure to welcome all of you for this panel discussion on medical oxygen, the issues and way forward. Of course, all of you know Nitte deemed University is in the forefront to organize several webinars after this COVID-19 on several topics of interest to the medical fraternity, public and policy makers. Today, such one topic has been taken on medical oxygen. The chairman of this panel is none other than our own Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. Satish Kumar Bhandari, an able academician, a researcher, and able administrator. Of course, his specialization is ENT. After serving for a few years in KMC, he joined KSI the Medical Academy. Of course, he has contributed to this Nitte deemed University in various ways. He was Dean of our medical school before becoming the Vice Chancellor of this Nitte deemed University. He is an academician par excellence, researcher having handled several projects and also administrator today. He is our Aryabhatta awardee in the year 2006 and he has written several books and he has plenty of ideas on this management of COVID-19. Recently, the university under his stewardship got the A+ grade from the NAC accreditation. Sir, on behalf of the Indian Institution Innovation Council and my own behalf, I welcome you, sir. We have other members of the panel. First, I will introduce Mr. Rabindranath Rathod. He is a very senior government official, presently working as Joint Director in the Department of Factories and Boilers, Government of it is Industrial Safety and Health, Government of Karnataka. He had his mechanical degree from Government BDT College and later he entered the Karnataka Government Service in the year 1996 and he has worked as enforcement officer in the entire Karnataka and he also held the position of e-governance nodal officer. Sir, on behalf of the Nitte deemed University, I welcome you. We have another industry personnel, Sri Ranganath Punekar. He has 32 years of industrial experience. He is again a mechanical engineer. He has worked in petrochemicals, air separation, and projects, maintenance, design, and so on. He has worked in IPCL, Praxair, JSW now. He is the Deputy General Manager of JSW Industrial Gases. He has worked in design, installation, commission in oxygen plants both in India and abroad. And sir, on behalf of the Nitte deemed University, I have pleasure in welcoming you to this panel. We have other two members, our own family members. Our senior doctor, Dr. Sripata Mehantale. is a very senior anesthesiologist and the professor head of the Department of Anesthesiology and Critical Care in the Justice K.S. Charitable Hospital, Delakete. To me, he is a simple human being, easily approachable, a person with a lot of ideas, interested in innovation and research. He has held several positions outside, also secretary of the Karnataka chapter of the anesthesiology, secretary for long period, I think, and later he became the president. He is well known nationally as an anesthesiology professor and head of the department of our medical school. Sir, on behalf of the Institution Innovation Council and my own behalf on the university, I welcome you to this panel. We have another senior professor, Dr. Giridhar. He is professor and head of the Department of Pulmonary Medicine in the Justice K.S. Hospital. Dr. Giridhar specialized in interventional medicine, mostly in the area of allergy and asthma, specialized in interventional medicine, and he is again with the hospital for a number of years. He has been associated with several societies. On behalf of the University and Institution Innovation Council, I welcome Dr. Giridhar to this panel. Welcome you, sir. I also take pleasure in welcoming all other members of the Nitte deemed university family. Members, please note we have taken this important topic of this oxygen. Today, you know, exponential surge of coronavirus infection is really putting our healthcare system to test. Although many people say India has got the best healthcare system, now it is being tested because of this exponential surge. Of course, there are many issues. Is it a manufacture of oxygen is an issue? Is it a storage is an issue? Is it transportation is an issue? Of course, oxygen therapy is required for people with hypoxemia, I think. It is a low oxygen level in the blood. So there is no doubt. For me as a chemical engineer, oxygen is a very, very basic chemical element and in air 21% and abundantly available. But I never thought oxygen will become such a shortage commodity. But all of you know the Linde process of 1895 where cryogenic distillation and easily it can make pure oxygen. But the problem today, some people are saying, is it a multi-stage compressor, has to be imported, is not available. So transportation, is it by pipeline, is it by cryogenic tankers, or today we are talking about train, or through Air Force planes are coming, transporting oxygen from one side to another side of India, because we have not planned this oxygen plant mostly in the east, we want in north and south. Of course, to discuss all these issues, we have experts. Prevention is better than cure. So we don't want Chamrajnagar type of tragedy once again. So we have invited senior people in the industry, regulatory authority and doctors for discussion. Before I leave it to the panel, let me request our Honorable Vice Chancellor, the chairman of the panel, to give his introductory remark. Over to our Honorable Vice Chancellor.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Sri Niketan, for the good introduction. I thank Mr. Rathod, Joint Director, Department of Factories and Boilers, Industrial Safety and Health, Government of Karnataka. Thank you very much, sir, for joining the panel and participating in this discussion. Mr. Ranganath Punekar, again a very distinguished person, Deputy General Manager, JSW Industrial Gases, the lifeline of Karnataka. Thank you very much for participating in this panel discussion. And Sri Niketan, our Director for Institution Innovation Council, Mr. Pai, the coordinator, and I could see the distinguished senior members of the university. I welcome you all for this panel discussion regarding the medical oxygen issues and way forward. Few months back, a few weeks back, when I was discussing with the Sri Niketan and the issues of shortage of particularly the oxygen medicine like remdesivir, then ventilators, That was the hot topic. As you all know, we are going through a very unprecedented situation due to COVID-19. For the last more than a year, I think this has become a very a serious issue, and we neglected the first wave. I think we didn't prepare well. In the morning, we had a discussion about what the lessons learned in the first and second wave, the way forward. I think when you are discussing the whole issue of oxygen, it's a poverty in the midst of plenty. That what Sriniketan rightly said. Oxygen is available everywhere, and our country has got the capacity to produce oxygen. But unfortunately, the issues are the transportation and supply line, giving supply line, because as you know, oxygen, you have to be very careful while transporting oxygen. There is definite methods are there in transporting, then storage, and it is supplied to the hospital. Whole this issue is discussed in the background of our magnitude of the problem. See, we are 1.4 billion humanity. That's about 16% of the world population residing in this 2.4% of the world land in India. And the magnitude of the problem, particularly the healthcare sector, it has been exposed during this COVID pandemic. Because whatever the infrastructure we create, it cannot be overnight. It has to be sustained addition of facilities, particularly in the healthcare sector. It cannot be prepared overnight. What we have done in the last more than 7 decades in providing, giving adequate facilities for the healthcare sector, it has been very dismal, and now it has exposed. And as Sriniketan said, during this COVID pandemic, such a big magnitude of pandemic disease, our resources have been overstretched and naturally results in chaotic situation. Now, whatever we are doing, I think what has happened is happened. Now we should think about the future, and at the same time, whatever we are doing, because you know that there is a lot of pressure on the government and officials to address the issues caused by particularly the oxygen issue. It has become a debatable issue nationally or even internationally. But how to solve it, that I think we should discuss, because as you know, corona or COVID-19 is a viral disease. The mainstay of treatment is, because 80% of people have got a mild or asymptomatic disease. When they go into 20 become symptomatic, the mainstay of treatment is oxygen therapy. And you can add steroids, and sometimes when you go into the ICU, we may have to do artificial ventilation, the assisted ventilation you have to provide. Again, you want oxygen. The demand for oxygen has gone up. For example, in our hospital, KSID Charitable Hospital, it's a 1,000-bed hospital. We got around 300 beds dedicated to COVID patients. There are around 40 patients in the intensive care unit. Earlier, our requirement was around 400 liters of oxygen. Now it has become 1.2 kiloliter, almost 3 times of the requirement has increased due to COVID situation because of the COVID patients in the ICU and in oxygenation beds. I was going to the statistics. I think our other Punikar and other participants, we can correct me if I am wrong. I understand that we had capacity of about 7,200 metric tons of oxygen being generated in the country, out of which only the requirement before COVID was around 15 to 20% was required as medical oxygen. But during first wave, it increased to 3,000 metric tons. And the production also has been increased now to around 9,200, probably by directing the industrial oxygen to medical oxygen. I think since it is a requirement for steel industry, they could divert the industrial oxygen into medical requirement. So in spite, because actually there is excess production, according to the strategy, I feel there is excess production. But unfortunately, this, now the requirement, I understand it has gone up to around 7,000 odd metric tons. But still there is oxygen. But unfortunately, we should have logistics, we should have transport, because it has to be shifted in the form of cryogenic oxygen. So we should have a cryogenic tankers. I understand before this pandemic, second wave, we had around 1,200 trucks which can transport. I think it has been added again, 1,200 has been added. Then they use the train and all those things. But all these things are, they look stopgap arrangements, and always it may not sustain for longer period. So we have to plan our healthcare sector, and we should have proper logistics. We have to have proper supply lines to continuously supply oxygen, because now the requirement has increased in the district hospitals and even the villages. Now the oxygen requirement for primary health centers also. Earlier they were not using so much of oxygen, but now the requirement for peripheral hospitals in the villages also has increased. So that has given the tremendous pressure on the supply chain of oxygen to the healthcare sector. I was going through the industrial regulation, and I understand the Indian medical gases is regulated by Ministry of Commerce and Industry and Central Drugs Standard Control Organization. It's monitoring our medical gases. But all these facilities and requirements of manufacturing, transport and installations are governed by various guidelines and regulations. In spite of that, these regulations, there can be catastrophic accidents involving the human life, because if it is not done properly, if you don't follow the guidelines properly, there can be major casualties in the hospitals. So we have to be very, very safe. And I think we should have, actually, I don't know whether we are planning for that. The country should go for a medical oxygen policy, supply policy. I don't know whether it is already in the purview of the government. I think we should have proper guidelines. And I was going through some requirement of NEFA guidelines, 99 guidelines for national, it comes under actually National Fire Protection Association guidelines. So any hospital with more than 250 beds or requirement of ICU, if it is above certain level, one should have 3 sources of oxygen. The hospital should have liquid oxygen storage plant, should have oxygen generator, and the third very important emergency measure is the oxygen manifold with the cylinders. Oh, that's very mandatory. I think if all the hospitals in the country follow these guidelines, this type of atmosphere, this type of shortage may not arise. And what we see is really heart-rendering. In certain places, patients have died because of the oxygen shortage. Even after this particular second wave, we are very cautious about the storage of oxygen in our hospital. Every day we talk to the people, medical superintendent and other people who are involved in the hospital, to find out adequate oxygen is stored in our storage plant. So because oxygen shortage can lead on to catastrophe in the hospital. So we have to be very careful. I think to discuss this issue threadbare and suggest some guidelines, what we can do, what is the way forward in this situation of oxygen shortage. It may be artificial or it may be real. So we have got a very learned panel of Professor Sriniketan, Professor Shripad and Professor Giridhar, and our external resource person, very distinguished resource persons, Mr. Rathod, the Joint Director, and Mr. Ranganath Punekar from the ASW Industrial Gases, Ballari. I hope we'll have very fruitful panel discussion and we'll come out with guidelines so that from the university, Nitte University, we can in the forefront of working towards producing a conducive atmosphere to the hospital as far as this important source for life-saving material for managing COVID patients is concerned. Thank you very much for giving this opportunity. I request the MC to take it forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Now, to start with, I request all the members of the panel to give initially about 10 minutes. We'll give for each person to give their views. We'll start with Mr. Ranganath Punekar, is the DGM of JSW Industrial Gases. He can present his views on the production and other issues with respect to oxygen generation. Over to Mr. Ranganath Punekar.
Good afternoon, Professor Sriniketan, Dr. Satish Kumar Bhandari, Mr. Rathod. Thank you all on this panel. It's an honor to be on this panel talking about the requirements of medical oxygen, the scarcity condition that we are facing these days. So it's very, whenever you open a paper, you look at any news website, it's always the news of, so many people died in such and such a place, and no oxygen in such and such a place. We have been interacting with the government agencies, Mr. Rathod's team, and so we know this situation. That there have been instances when at night we had to summon a tanker which was supposed to go elsewhere to a place which was about to run out of oxygen in the next few hours. So it's a very difficult situation. Hopefully we'll be getting out of this situation very soon. So with that hope, we are proceeding, but with that in the background, we need to plan for this kind of a situation coming up in the third wave that is widely anticipated by all the medical professionals. So let me give you a brief about how this process works. Firstly, we have the air separation units where the liquid oxygen is manufactured. This is a cryogenic process. The temperature goes below -180. When oxygen can be separated out, it's cryogenic distillation is what we call it. And then once that is done, then you load it onto the tankers through cryogenic pumps, and then it is transported over the carrier to the actual hospital, or it could be the bottling plant, the cylinder bottling plant, and then you have the unloading at the hospital, followed by vaporization and then supply to the patient. So that is the chain that is involved in this process. There are several links over here which need to be looked at given the situation that we are in. And there are several places where we can actually improve. One thing that can be done is putting up new oxygen plants, which takes time. And as Professor Sriniketan was saying, that these involve a lot of capital expenditure and import of equipment that take a lot of time. So the schedule is a typical minimum of 8 to 12 months at a very, very basic minimum level. So that is not the time that the kind of time that we have on our hands as of now. So that although for a period of maybe 2 to 3 years, we could still be looking at that that option. But we need to look at other options that are available that can be done very, very quickly to resolve this problem. So one thing would be putting up PSA plants. PSA plants typically take about maybe 3 to 4 months to be put up, and I'm told a plant that supplies about 1,000 liters per minute, which can take care of, on an average, about 100 patients. Would be, this kind of a plant, a 1000 LPM plant would cost about around 2 crore rupees. But that would be that has a very quick turnaround time, so that can be pursued. And the recent idea that came up of putting up bedded facilities where only corona patients who are in need of oxygen can be taken care of. These facilities have been put up close to oxygen plants, because manufacturing of liquid oxygen takes that's a very long process, and it's time consuming. It is power intensive. However, there's quite a lot of surplus gaseous oxygen that is available inside a typical steel plant, and the steel plants usually have the oxygen plants with them. So, the JSW Foundation has recently put up this 1,000 bed facility just outside the plant at Toranagallu. That is another option that needs to be pursued. And apart from this, there are several the supply chain that I was describing, right from the manufacturing up till the patient. There are several points where there could be leaks, of oxygen. So all of these can be looked at. There could be like something like an oxygen audit committee, which goes around and looking at where these could be plugged. Because frankly, we know that at least about 3 or 4% of the oxygen does get wasted because of several reasons, and this can be saved. Because this has already been made, and it is just a question of looking at where it is getting leaked, and we could save that oxygen. So these are some of the things that can be looked at for immediate implementation, and and saving the patients' lives.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. We'll have another round of 5 minutes for you at the end to give more suggestions. Now I invite our Dr. Sripadaji Mehendale, our senior doctor, to give his perception on this oxygen shortage, how to manage in the hospital. Sir. I now request Dr. Sripad. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Satish Bandare, Director of Institutional Innovation Council, Professor Sriniketan, all office bearers of the university, members of Institutional Council, Dr. Punekar, Mr. Rathod of Joint Director of Factories, and all other dignitaries and attendees. Good afternoon, everyone. I briefly like to highlight the oxygen requirement in a hospital, and just like to propose few things. Essentially, in a hospital, we require two kinds of oxygen supply. One is pressurized oxygen or high pressure oxygen. It is used mainly in intensive care units and in operation theatre to either drive the machineries, that is ventilators and other equipment, as well as to provide oxygen either in a high flow system or through the ventilator. So we need a high pressure oxygen supply, which is around 55 to 60 psi or 4.2 kgs per square centimeter. That kind of pressure is required. And the rest of the patients in the hospital, like in the wards, or most of the patients who are on oxygen, they require low pressure oxygen supply. They generally get about 5 to 10 liters of oxygen per minute, or maximum of 15 liters of oxygen per minute. As of now, with the COVID pandemic, many of the patients are on a non-ray breathing system. That means they get only oxygen, 100% oxygen. But for them also, we can give low pressure oxygen. So we need two kinds of oxygen supply. And this high pressure oxygen can be supplied, generally supplied through three methods. One is we can have a cryogenic plant or a tank established through which oxygen is at a very high pressure and it is liquid form which is vaporized and delivered at required pressure, or it can be supplied to the cylinders through the, as Dr. Punekar said, from the bottling point we get cylinders at 2000 psi, and those cylinders are connected in two banks. One bank gets over, other bank switches over, like that. And many of the peripheral hospitals manage with this kind of system. They transport the cylinders periodically, stock them, and utilize the pressurized oxygen this way. And third is, and the most news-making system is the PSA, pressure swing adsorption, where oxygen can be concentrated from the air available and can be pressurized and used for day-to-day activities. So three kinds of oxygen supply can be obtained. And now the current government is giving impetus to establish these kinds of oxygen concentrators. We can say it is a large scale oxygen concentrator, similar to one what we can use on a bedside or home oxygenation. Only the scale is bigger and we have compressor adapted into this. So only the small difference. So these kinds of oxygen supplies can be utilized for high pressure oxygenation. Whereas rest of the patients in the hospital who get 5 to 10 or 15 liters of oxygen per minute on face mask can get oxygen through low pressure system. Just I like to highlight one incident happened in Coimbatore a few days ago, where Coimbatore though is famous for medical establishments, lot of specialty hospitals are there, most advanced procedures are performed. Patients from all over the world visit Coimbatore for state-of-the-art surgical procedures and so on and so on. However, with the latest pandemic, there was a great need for oxygen beds in Coimbatore, not only ventilators, even regular oxygen beds were not in good supply. So there were difficulties and patients were losing lives. One of our colleagues, anesthesiologist Dr. Balavenkata, I am proud to name him in fact, he organized funds and equipment in such a short while, maybe 72 hours. They gathered compressors, then gathered dehydrating units, they gathered these zeolite sieves and tanks and put the plumbing in place. And in about 72 hours, they established more than 100 or 120 beds of oxygen. That means they can supply oxygen up to 10 to 15 liters per minute without pressure, of course, to the needy patients, and you can rapidly admit these patients in such a short time. So this wonderful event, they organized funds from all over the world through their alumnus and Rotary and other establishments. So these kinds of things are also possible during pandemic. So everything is not so grim and dim. Actually, there are a lot of brighter stories to tell. That is that apart. Just highlighting this example to say that when we say oxygen, it is not only the high pressure oxygen, even this low pressure oxygen supplies can be of great help to tide over oxygen crisis. Of course, this supply is not sufficient to manage the patient who are critical and they require ventilatory support. That system is different, as I already told, they require high pressure oxygen. However, if we can divide the systems into two and adequately equip ourselves to supply both, I think we can reduce the load on this liquefied oxygen or the bottling units where they have to supply us very high pressure oxygen, because much of the oxygen during this pandemic at least is used for regular oxygen beds where patients take up to 15 liters of oxygen per minute. And there may be many more such patients compared to the patients who are in ICU who require pressurized oxygen, or the distribution may be even. Say if our hospital is using about maybe last few days we used up to 1.8 metric ton of oxygen per day. Half of that may be low pressure and rest may be high pressure to drive ventilators and manage the patient in ICU. If we can reduce so much of load on this system, so much transport and other logistics requirement is reduced, and pressure on the government and other authorities is also reduced. So this is one way we can go ahead, establishing low pressure oxygenation systems at the local level. Even smaller hospitals can have these, and such a unit which gives about 100 liters of oxygen per minute can be established at a cost of 26 lakhs with the local resources. You can get our own Atmanirbhar, under Atmanirbhar tag we can say. Coimbatore has a lot of industries, and similarly the local industries, we can ramp up them, we can make them adopt to the local systems and get compressors, we can get sieves, we can get dehydrating towers, all these assembled locally, and of course plumbing is available everywhere now, that's not a problem. So we can put up these kind of units in a short time, and I think even smaller hospitals also can think of such investments and provide oxygenated beds. Coming to second part, even Dr. Punekar has highlighted about that PSA units. Of course, it takes some time because we may not locally get the resources, the kind of sieves required, the compressors required, and the tanks required may not be so easily assembled at local level because they need to be imported or specially ordered, manufactured. Typically, it takes 6 weeks of minimum, or maybe up to 3 months to have good establishment. And there are also certain logistical issues that the filters and other spares required are to be sometimes imported to have a high quality performance. Another point to be noted with these things is that liquefied oxygen or pressurized oxygen is supplied at a 99.5% purity, whereas PSA and other lower pressure oxygen generally typically supplied at 89 to 93% purity. That may not matter much in general usage. When we have to use it for high performance devices like ventilators and in operation theaters, we may have to be more cautious, whereas other places, I think the PSA and other technologies are good enough to cater for the patients. And coming to the last segment, that is home oxygenators, what now getting a lot of focus. Generally, there are two kinds. One is low flow systems which supply up to 5 liters per minute, and there are bigger machines which supply up to 10 liters per minute. They were typically manufactured earlier for home use of respiratory equipment. I think Dr. Giridhar can throw more light on this kind of usage. And this kind of equipment can be combined with this BiPAP or the equipment generally used, commonly used for patients having sleep apnea syndrome or obstructive sleep apnea, where generally they don't require oxygen supplementation, they require a little bit of positive pressure to keep their airway open. So this to some extent helps in patients who are on respiratory distress. They reduce work of breathing to a small extent. At the same time, you can give supplemental oxygen, so enrich their air with oxygen, so they can improve their oxygenation, at the same time can reduce some amount of work of breathing. So some people, maybe small segments, about 20% of the people who reach ICU or ventilator beds can be managed with this kind of system. At a ward level, we can have a low pressure oxygen supply and these BiPAP machines, and or at even at peripheral isolation. If doctors are available who can manage these kind of devices, I think we can reduce a lot of load on the intensive care units and tertiary care hospitals. I think this is also one way to go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. We'll give another 5 minutes.
Thanks for the time.
Now I request Mr. Ravindranath Rathod, our Joint Director of Factories, to give his version, because everybody is telling oxygen is available, the logistic part is required. He is from the regulatory authority on this. So may now invite Mr. Rathod to give his views.
Thank you, Dr. Sriniketan sir, Honorable Vice Chancellor Satish Kumar Bhandari sir, Professor Dr. Sriniketan sir, Mr. Ranganath, the DGM, GSW, IGPL factory, Dr. Sripad, Dr. Giridhar, and respected invitees and my dear friends. So basically, my job is to look after the safety and health and welfare of the industries. And I came into this field of oxygen monitoring and management last year 2020. See, my office located at Ballari. So the then Deputy Commissioner Mr. Nakul sir, he appointed me as a district nodal officer for a supply of oxygen to the Ballari district. And after that, again, I am the member in the State Distribution Committee, that is Oxygen Committee also. And from last year, I am looking after this distribution system in the Ballari district as a nodal officer. See, all of us knows that this pandemic has taught so many lessons to us. And it has given a clear picture how is our medical facility and the availability of the drugs or oxygen, whatever it may be, and the manpower and medical fraternity and so many things it has taught us. To overcome all this, we are struggling 24/7. Somehow we are managing. We are not giving a surplus supplies to everyone, but we are managing. But the thing is, touchwood, nothing has happened so far except that Chamraj hospital issue. That is a separate thing. I don't want to discuss what had happened. So, but many times people says we should learn the lesson from the mistakes, not the success. If we see the successful stories, we can only get the messages, but we don't get sometimes the solutions. But however, oxygen is now considered as in this pandemic considered as the main drug for the treatment of the COVID. So far, last year in the beginning of the pandemic, we were talking about the drugs, we were talking about the separate isolation centers, COVID care centers, treating hospitals, and all those things. Suddenly, in the month of last year, June, July, and August, at the end of the beginning of the August, suddenly there was a scarcity of oxygen. Then suddenly we started mobilizing our resources. But this is not our only not the condition or situation of our country. Even in the foreign countries also, even in USA also, there are a lot of issues in mobilizing the infrastructure, facilities, and availability of the oxygen. And this in the second wave, I think we never expected such a sudden surge of patients will come, and there will be a panic condition among the people and among the medical fraternity and among the government officials also. So, but however, still till today we are managing with the help of our esteemed manufacturers located at Jindal JSW Jindal Torangal, and they are having a panel of series of teams to cater the oxygen from the Jindal to our state, even to the Bidar, up to Kodagu, and they are also supplying to the other neighboring states also. But in this pandemic, somehow we are managing, we are supplying the oxygen just in time. Because now the main concept in the manufacturing sector is just in time. The same way we are supplying oxygen to the hospital in just in time. Before 2 hours or 3 hours, sometimes 1 hour. Within 1 hour, the hospital sends an SOS to the officers stating that, sir, within 2 hours, our oxygen stock will exhaust, and we need at least 10 cylinders, 20 cylinders immediately to prolong the or to cater the patients. 50 patients or 40 patients the oxygen supplies. But however, in Ballari, during the last pandemic, and first wave itself, our Nakul sir, DC sir, and the other officials started establishing commissioning their tanks for a storage of liquids in 3-4 major institutes. Because of that, now we have a storage tank of capacity 46 kiloliters in Ballari district, distributed among the 5 major hospitals and 1 medical college. So because of that, see, we are now without any interruption, without any panic conditions, we are supplying or we are maintaining 1,400 and odd oxygenated beds 24/7 with the required pressure. Without any cause, we are supplying oxygen to the patients. So that is one achievement of the Ballari district. And recently, today I think the commission part will be completed in one of the new dental college. So 6 KL tank we are commissioning, and that will suffice the problems of the 140 oxygenated beds with the required pressure, whatever the medical advisory board has said. So much of pressure, so much of flow, and all those things we are overcoming that problem also. So the first thing is in Ballari district, totally 22 government hospitals are there and 16 private hospitals. They are dedicated to the COVID, dedicated as the COVID care centers, and around 1,469, and out of 1,469 oxygenated beds, some around 350 ICU beds are also we are operating. And our one more achievement is I think our district administration with the collaboration of with the help of the JSW, they have established 1,000-bedded oxygenated 24/7 without interruption 24/7 gaseous oxygen supply facility at Thorangallu. So with this we are managing in Ballari district, and we are not adopting any new concept or new theory to manage the oxygen, because see, the demand is so much. No SAP or no ESP or no theoretical the high-end systems will not work in this kind of demand. So because demand and supply gap is huge, it cannot be compensated. Only thing is, when I receive the call from in a hospital, I first pray the God that I have to be successful in this situation, and immediately I start calling one or the other. Continuously I used to call, even Punekar is also, I think he also received so many calls in case of, I think he has, just now he has quoted one incident of Bidar. Then we made 3 plans, plan A, plan B, plan C, but we succeeded in plan A itself. So like that, with the help of the manufacturer supply chain team, they are very dedicated and very sophisticated team, and having a very good infrastructure. With their help, we could save on that day 500 lives. 500. It is not 150 or 100 or 30 or 24. So there, suppose that we were not able to supply within 3 hours, 5 hours. If I'm 5 hours. If within 5 hours, sending a vehicle from Thorangallu, it is not at all possible to send a vehicle from Thorangallu to be there within 5 hours. But we planned plan A, plan B, plan C, but we operated all the plans simultaneously, because see, in the emergency cases, we cannot rely on, because all our equipments only on nothing is we can ensure the human assurance, but equipment cannot ensure you or assure you that it will reach in time to the destination. But they supplied that day they supplied oxygen from Hyderabad, and simultaneously we sent 2 vehicles from Thorangallu. If anything happens at Hyderabad, the toll vehicle has to go and cater the or supply the oxygen like that. So there was one major incident, very successfully we have managed that day. So here, so as per the government norms only we are operating. As per the government guidelines, we established one oxygen supply cell, oxygen monitoring cell with the teams of the officers in that cell and two nodal officers and committee members, around 10 to 15 committee members are there, and with the help of the medical fraternity and district surgeons and medical advisors. So we have calculated the amount of oxygen required for each hospital, and after calculating the requirement of each hospital based on the supply, how much liter per minute of oxygen has to be supplied. Based on that, we calculated how much the storage capacity or the storage system has to be provided to the hospital. That we calculated 15-20 days back only, and based on that we supplied. For suppose a Taluka hospital is running a 100-bed hospital, out of 100-bed hospital, 60 bed if they are dedicated for the COVID. So how much required for 60 bedded and what is the mode of storage of oxygen in that hospital? Then we calculated that. Then we supplied for each hospital, we supplied 100 jumbo cylinders, that D-type cylinders of capacity 7 normal meter cube capacity. That means that one cylinder supplies 7,000 liters of gaseous oxygen to the patient. So based on these kind of the calculations, we audited the oxygen requirement also. So based on that, we supplied 100 cylinders to the Taluka hospital, and we advised them to make 3 batches, 30, 30, 33 batches. One batch of cylinder, filled cylinder, it is supplying to the patients. 30 cylinders will be as a backup, and 30 cylinders will be in the transit for the refilling of the refilling process. So like that, we planned in the beginning itself, and based on that.
Thank you, sir. We'll have another round of presentation from you.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
We now move on to the another doctor from our own Justice Case Head Charity Hospital, Dr. Giridhar. He is professor and head of pulmonary medicine. May I now invite Dr. Giridhar to present his views on the oxygen utilization and how to manage in hospital. Dr. Giridhar.
Girdhar sir, please unmute yourself. Girdhar sir, please unmute.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon to Honorable Vice Chancellor and to the esteemed panel for providing me this opportunity to interact with such a distinguished guest. So, as everybody has mentioned, we are passing through an unprecedented pandemic, and it's a very sorry state of affairs in the hospital, especially in the ICUs and the high dependency areas. So we have to be prepared for the future epidemics. Probably we are passing off through the second epidemic. There may be further waves might be coming, and there are predictions that third wave may involve the children also. So what happened is now the disease has spread to the rural swaths. So most of the critical cases will still come to the ICUs for months to come. And also we are seeing an unprecedented number of pneumonia patients, almost 250, 20 times more than the normal patients. Suppose if we have regularly some 5 to 10 patients, we now have around 100 plus patients, many of them requiring oxygen and ICU support. So, and also in these patients, the disease is such that the disease progresses slowly, and also it improves or even deteriorates slowly. So the ICU turnaround time is much more than the other pneumonias. So normally patients will recover or deteriorate within a matter of 5 to 7 days, but here patients take up to weeks. So the number of hospital beds occupied by COVID patients is very humongous. The number of cases itself is very high, plus their stay in each, whether to improve or to deteriorate also, they take longer time than a regular pneumonias. So the stress on the ICU is too heavy. So also, as we are going through the industrial oxygenation, and Dr. Shripad sir has briefly touched upon the contamination issue. So we also have to look for the safety of the oxygen supply, because we are also seeing the another I must say that it is worse than the COVID, that is mucormycosis, or also popularly known as block fungus. So these are the issues. Plus we need to have a policy, as our Honorable Vice Chancellor has told, that the policy for oxygen usage and oxygen produce should be there, because judicial use of oxygen is also very important. Most of the time oxygen is considered as a supplement, a harmless supplement, but it is not always the case, because over oxygenation also has a lot of bad impact on the human system, including lung fibrosis, and it reduces respiratory drive. So this is also a medicine which has to be very diligently used. These are the few issues. So especially the COVID patients take a oxygen supply for a longer duration, and unprecedented longer duration of stay, and the number is continuously increasing. These are the issues at our end from the managing these COVID patients, if I have to briefly summarize.
Thank you, sir. Now we have heard from the different members of the panel several issues with respect to the manufacture, transportation, and utilization. Recently, DRDO has conducted 3 phases of trial, clinical trial on the 2-DG or 2-deoxy-D-glucose medicine. As per Dr. Sripat has mentioned, this will reduce the spread of the virus or oxygen requirement. That's what people expect. Now, the government has said that, as our Honorable Vice Chancellor was mentioning, I saw somewhere a policy, or somewhere is in the offing, where they have said whether we can set up PSA units in far-flung areas, because if the logistics, as our Joint Director has put it, from sending from Bellary to Bidar, and with another thing coming from Hyderabad, can we set up before this another 2-3 months are there, before the third wave, can we set up PSA units in far-flung areas? And hospital storage, they say minimum 10 days. Of course, in our hospital, I was told by the dean, we have about 10 days storage. Based on the worst case scenario of how much oxygen is required, the government is telling 10 days minimum storage. And compared to the road, train mode is faster, because the speed maximum, they say 30 kilometers. Here, train can go 100 kilometers. Wherever train links are there, can we shift? Avoid oxygen wastage and unnecessary usage of oxygen. And we also, as our Punekar will support, we have to train our technicians, we have to have service providers at the hospital. When we set up so many PSA units, we need more technicians and so on. Of course, I am very glad JSW, yesterday in the paper I read, 1,000-bed hospital nearer to the steel plant, Tornagallu, they have set up. Whether such kind of models can be adopted. I now request our Honorable Vice Chancellor to initiate how the way forward from his experience, he can give some ideas. Over to our Honorable Vice Chancellor.
Thank you, Sriniketan. I got, see, whatever I already narrated this particular part of the addressing the issues, always will make stopgap arrangements whenever it is whatever, it may be drought, or it may be cyclone, or now the pandemic. Whatever we are doing, yes, we are good at managing the crisis. But the investment what you make today, you should be for the next generation. I think unless we do that, we will end up with the wastage of public money. And after, again, as our pharmacologist said, when the 4th wave or 5th wave comes, again we will be in the same status. like electricity grid, we should have an oxygen grid. It will, because what happens is, just I was reading about, as I said, the biggest problem with oxygen is the logistic and transit and supply line. And most of the steel plants are located in the eastern side of the country, and the middle, probably middle, and that has to be transported, the oxygen, in a whatever format, in the cryogenic format. It should be shifted to far off areas. Even for us, we have got luckily, earlier we used to depend on manifold oxygen cylinders. I know when I was a dean of the medical school, our hospital was depending on manifold oxygen cylinders, and we used to get daily from Mangalore. But luckily, we just before the pandemic, I think 2 years back, we invested on 11,000 kiloliters of liquid oxygen storage plant, which is, as you said, in earlier calculation, if it is 600, 800 per day liters, then it will last for about two weeks. But at during now the present pandemic, as our NSA Asia head of department, Sripad Mahendra has said, now it has gone up to 1,200, 1,800. So it hardly, sometimes when it goes down 2,000, our heart starts palpitating. So it's always dangerous depending on a supply chain which is coming from more than 400, 500 kilometers. Anything can happen when there is a transit, and we can't depend on that. I think we should have a oxygen storage and usage and transport policy in the state, at least for state. I request our joint director to suggest the government that we should have an oxygen grid. And yes, our hospitals of our size, we can now, we already have decided to acquire PSA plant immediately. Within the next 2 months, we are going to install one 530 liters per minute capacity plant, imported one from Italy. Because what I was to understand, that the geolite which is required for a PSA unit is very, very important, very critical. The rest of the things can be done locally, can be indigenous parts can be acquired. But the important part of the what we call geolite, that has to be imported. That's what I was understand. I think there should be, for the different usage, there should be different guidelines. The people are having more than 50 or 60, whatever number, ICU units, or 35 or 40, that our intensive care, who are in charge of the intensive care, Dr. Giridhar and Sripad can suggest. For that, such hospitals should have all the three sources, like oxygen storage plant, should have a generator, oxygen generator, and also a manifold with the cylinders. So we can manage any sort of situation. For a smaller hospitals, where what I understand, now it has become a sort of a passion to talk about oxygen. Suddenly everybody has woken up and they're talking in terms of supplying oxygen generators to small hospitals. Suppose there's a peripheral loss. One of the important, because as a dean, I know the managing the oxygen is very important and one of the most neglected area. And if there is any complication, I think particularly it happens in the night. Suppose in the manifold oxygen gets exhausted, it will alarm. But then there may not be anybody to attend such situation. I think that can end up with a lot of catastrophic accidents which can happen. But when you are generating a oxygen plant, when the pandemic goes down, if there is not adequate usage or if there is not proper people, we are good at investing on equipment, and we are stingy or we are conservative about putting a manpower, because we have got good transport ambulances, but that may not be good drivers. We have got good X-ray machines, may not be X-ray technicians. That should not happen, particularly to remote hospitals, primary health centers, or even small hospitals where there are no medical college support or bigger institutions. So I think we should have a concrete policy. The purpose of this meeting, I think even after this meeting, I request Sriniketan to invite ideas from various stakeholders and come out with our own idea, our own policy, which we can recommend to the government of, at least to our state government. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Now I invite Mr. Punekar to give his closing remarks on this subject.
Thanks once again. So, a couple of points that I have. I did touch upon them when I talked first time, but the idea that came up from the central government, I think that these facilities, bedded facilities, should be put up near production units. That's really innovative, and it is going to solve a lot of problems for a lot of people. Because that is relatively easy to put up, and because of the abundance of oxygen, the availability of oxygen is there near these plants, inside these plants. So it can be easily tapped for usage by the patients. So that is one thing, and the second is about self-sufficiency. Now, obviously, we cannot have this kind of facility at every remote corner of the country. So each hospital should be self-sufficient on its own in case it does not have a backup of either liquid or cylinders. In that case, then they have to go in for this VPSA or PSA plant of its own. Relatively smaller one. The government could easily give subsidy in this in such cases. And the third is that steel plants or the production units can also be subsidized for setting up their own cylinder bottling facilities. For example, just when this problem started, our management took a decision that we will put up a bottling facility of our own. Although JSW is such a big company, but surprisingly we did not have any bottling plant of our own. So we have the company has taken a decision that we will set up our own bottling facility. What this does is that it is saving liquid, because most of these bottling plants, I'm sure almost 100% of these bottling plants, they rely only on liquid for bottling of the cylinders. So by using the gas, the surplus gas that is available inside the production unit for bottling these cylinders, then I'm saving on liquid, which can be utilized for transportation to hospitals. And apart from these, I also mentioned about the supply chain itself, and frankly, there are a lot of places where the losses can be reduced. If this is because these are cryogenic plants. If a plant is running at peak load or not, going forward for the third wave, I'm suppose when it comes, if it comes, would be somewhere during during September, October, when the temperatures would have cooled down a little bit. Temperature plays a big role in the production of an air separation unit. So as temperatures come down, then there's a slight increase in the production also. So that is going to benefit. And losses during the entire supply chain. Whether there is the maintenance of the pumps, whether the tankers that are through which this oxygen is getting transported, they have the external casing. It's under a vacuum. So if that vacuum is, then there is bound to be heat ingress and then loss of liquid. So whether that has been maintained properly or not, whether the pumps are maintained properly or not, and keeping an emergency vehicle. I think this came from Mr. Rathod sir's department, that we should have an emergency vehicle parked at the production facility, which can be loaded and parked at the production facility, which can be immediately sent off to a place where there is an emergency. By limiting the travel time, I think a lot of measures have been taken by giving priority for these tankers to be allowed through tolls, and even many places there are police escorts for these vehicles, and I'm sure even statistics can be used to minimize the time duration required for a particular tanker to reach the destination. And unload losses at the hospital, and training of the people who are going to be handling. There are several safety issues. I'm very concerned about the lack of knowledge of handling oxygen by the people, by the users in the hospital, because oxygen is something that is, although it's not inflammable by itself, but it supports combustion. If there is already a fire, then the flame can become many times the size if there is pure oxygen in that area. And vaporization and distribution losses, again at the customer end, and at the patient, the console itself, if there are any losses happening over there. So this entire chain can be audited for minimizing the losses, and that would really save a lot of lives. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your participation. Now I invite Dr. Sripath Mendele to give his closing remarks.
Good evening again. Thank you very much for the inputs, Mr. Pranekar and Rathod sir. Very useful inputs, especially the idea given by the Vice Chancellor was good, considering the density of the hospitals and medical colleges in places like Mangalore. I think this is a very practical thing, where we can have a system of providing oxygen wherever it is required. In fact, we can think of a system where piped oxygen can be supplied to the hospital if it is feasible that way. That I think Punekar can throw more light on its technicalities, because the density of the hospitals in a place like Mangalore is very high. Every 100 meters you may come across a hospital or a college. So it may not be logistically difficult task to establish a system where from single point we can supply the gas to whole of the medical system, medical establishment. But you have to also consider the possibility of disruption if there is any problem with the one point. That also we have to keep in mind, just like what happens with the electricity. So that it calls for having a standby bank in every establishment. But I think that will solve most of the logistical issues. Now because each hospital and each college has different requirement, and meeting them with this individual cryogenic tanks and all that is very difficult. So this one we can, I think Mr. Rathod can think of it and think of taking it forward. And this pandemic is not going to stop soon. I'm sure with what inputs we got in the morning from Dr. Ravi of NIMANS, so smaller waves of pandemic are going to be there with us, and there is going to be fluctuation among the patients admitted to a hospital and the oxygen requirement. And these arrangements are going to be permanent. At least next few years we are going to have them. And repeatedly the authorities may be called in for increasing the supplies, and with the due course of time there may be excess also that we have to balance. And if we can develop indigenous technologies to have cheaper and more affordable and easier techniques to extract oxygen locally, that may solve most of the problems, because we can still move more peripherally, so it gets decentralized. So dependency on logistics becomes less, and I think our engineering friends can help us in advancing the technologies to develop a local extraction of oxygen from air, so that the cost and the logistical issues are solved at a primary level. I thank the Nitte Institutional Innovation Cell and its Director Professor Sriniketan and our university led by our Vice Chancellor and all the faculty for this opportunity. Thank you very much.
I got one interruption to Punekar. What percentage of industrial oxygen has been converted to our medical oxygen in your from in Jindal? I think it's manufactured in steel factory. How much is conversion of industrial oxygen to medical oxygen now?
It's almost entirely now medical oxygen, sir. There's very little industrial oxygen, or oxygen being utilized for industrial purposes. So it's almost entirely for medical oxygen now.
Will it not affect the production of steel?
It does affect, yes. In fact, the steel plant has had to cut down some production. That has happened. But again, I think our chairman has said that lives are much more important than steel making. So that's the idea.
So in regard, one more, the purity of oxygen. I think Sripad raised that issue of the oxygen produced in the PSA unit and our cryogenic oxygen, which is converted to gaseous oxygen. What is the purity? Is there any issue of purity in the PSA plant?
Yes, typically PSA would give you something around maybe between 90 and maybe 95%. That's the purity. Cryogenic facilities would be in the excess of 98%, 98 to 99.5% in that range.
Okay. In Karnataka, how many oxygen plants are there? Oxygen manufacturing plants?
In Karnataka, most of them are concentrated over here in Toranagallu. The biggest capacity is over here in excess of. If you look at the gaseous itself, gaseous capacity, that's in excess of 10,500 tons per day. But liquid production would be maybe about 10% of that number. In Karnataka, this is the place. Toranagallu and Hospet, these are the regions. And apart from that, you have smaller facilities wherever you have metallurgical units, whether it is steel production or copper or any kind of smelting unit would be there.
Thank you.
Sir, may I now request our Joint Director,
Yes.
Mr. Rathod, to give his final concluding remarks. Mr. Rathod? So before that, we'll ask our Dr. Giridhar to give his final concluding remarks. I think connection is lost. He'll come.
Thank you again. So I would like to reiterate what Dr. Sripad has said. It is not going to be end of second wave. There is future waves may be coming, and there are epidemiological models suggest that up to 5 years the corona is going to affect us in a different ways. There will be a lot of spikes coming in between depending on the season and the new variants. And also what more worrying is this is a template which has been ideal for something like biological terrorism or something. Still there is a lot of controversy going on whether this could be a man-made one from the Wuhan lab, and even the earlier Government of India Foreign Ministry Affairs statements as early as 2020 February has suggested that it could be a material for bioterrorism. So this has set an ideal template. The virus which spreads through aerosols, very easy and
Can't hear.
Hello, sir.
ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಲೌಡ್ ಕೇಳ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ.
Sir. So this is an ideal template for the bioterrorism also, because aerosol transmission is very easy to transmit from one person to one person. So as our Honorable Vice Chancellor has said, whatever the setup which we are going to do, it should exist for the next generation or so, or maybe more than that. Instead of doing a stopgap affair, And as a pulmonologist and completely from a clinical perspective, we expect that such epidemics is going to be more frequent one, not only due to from the angle of bioterrorism, but also due to man and environment interaction and the changing demography and the climatic changes. So we have to be ready for the such things in times to come. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now I invite our Mr. Rathod, our Joint Director. Sir, our Honorable Vice Chancellor has talked about some policy. Sir, unmute.
Okay, sir.
Sir, our Honorable Vice Chancellor has suggested some policy grid network to be formed. Our Shripad doctor said smaller hospitals and grid of hospitals in Mangalore, we can have a different kind of storage and distribution. I now invite you to give some thoughts on this, sir.
Thank you, sir. See, already government, central government and state government has started some policy. I mean, they are giving some SOPs. So, if the 100-bed hospital, what are the facilities should have, and what are the facilities to be provided by the colleges. All these things that I think already they have started giving, advising the colleges and other institutions also. Now, the issue is what kind of facilities we should have to overcome such challenges. It needs to be a technical expert committee has to discuss on all aspects. Like we are establishing a cryogenic plant near Udupi or Shimoga so that we can cater that region. Then what are the challenges, problems for the maintenance, continuity, and to cater, and all those logistic infrastructure and other things. So it requires a marathon discussion on this issue. But as far as my knowledge, some of the steel industries here in Ballari, in Gulbarga, so these mega projects, mega industries, they have during their project inception, during their project construction, they have established many air separation plants. For example, at Sri Cement, recently they have completed that project, and they were having a air separation system already. So that they repaired and serviced, and they now catering 150 cylinders per day to the Gulbarga district. But whereas here in Ballari, one of the factories also having that air separation system, but because of the unavailability of the equipments or the parts or some of the issues, we were not able to revive that. So like that, all over Karnataka or all over India, we are having some equipments or plants which can generate 150 cylinders. I mean, refill the 150 or 200 cylinders per day. So we have to pull up these equipments, whatever available in our state and in our country, and based on the requirement, based on the first the Ballari, Hubli, Dharwad, and other districts, nearby districts, if they are self-sufficient for their oxygen this thing, then the Ballari oxygen plant concentrate on the southern parts where this kind of the industries may not be feasible for establishing the cryogenic plants at Mangalore and other things. But however, so it's my suggestion is, see, now we know the logistic problems, we know the manufacturing problems, we know the issues. So if we establish at Bhadravati or Mysore, see, because already there is a lot of industrial activities is going on. So day to day they are required. But the refilling, as the Pudekar said, the manufacturers, if they are having in their premises these refilling units also, so then immediately the one logistic problem we can avoid, and immediately we can supply to the other hospitals. So as our Honorable Vice Chancellor rightly said, so wherever there is concentrated hospitals or the dedicated hospitals are there, in and around or nearby, if a plant is been established, whether it is being utilized or for several years, for 10 years, even for 10 years, if it is not utilized, also not an issue. But we should have that kind of facility, whatever be the, see, because now this is the virus, then after 3 months, one more phase will come. After 6 months, another phase may come. So we don't know what kind of situations we are supposed to tackle and all those things. So for this, you form a committee or a team of experts in all aspects, logistic, then establishment of the industry and transportations, and how much. And one more thing, I would like to ask the medical experts, so that now the people are start telling that we are giving 5 liters per minute. After that, if it is not sufficient, then 10 liters, 15 liters, 30 liters, 60 liters. And as far as the safety concerned, as far as the medical mechanical engineering background, with the background and safety, too much giving oxygen to the patient is also toxic, and it also hurt if the pressurized oxygen is given to the lungs, it also hurt the lungs, or it damages the lung tissues, and that will not give a better result. So in all the areas, we have to be prepared. We have to form a SOP on that. And nowadays, government, whatever the policies governments are making, so for that we can have a comprehensive project on a report, and if we submit to the government, definitely government will also give subsidy for establishing such kind of facilities in Karnataka. And one more, lastly, see, Bhadravati is having that facility, oxygen generated. For last 15 days also, we were not able to revive that plant. Bhadravati steel plant, VISL plant is having that capacity, but we are not able to restart that. So here in 3 industries, they are having a oxygen suppression facility, but because of the 10 years ago, it was established, commissioned. Now they were not able to restart that. So such kind of facilities, we have to keep in healthy conditions. Whatever be the situation, we have to keep such plants in healthy condition. Whenever there is a pandemic, whenever there is a need, so we can utilize those facilities. So we have to mobilize that first, and we have to plan the grid or whatever the kind of circuit for supplying the oxygen 24/7 without any interruption, without any panic conditions. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, sir, for your participation and interest in this. Okay. Any panel member wants to add anything?
So may I say something? Thank you.
Yes, please,
now,
madam.
Just like NABL for accreditation, we know that there is a National Institute for this Occupational Safety and Health Administration. So when we look at the hazard substance fact sheet, a lot of what our panel member from Ballari said is contained in that, and therefore even a consortium coming together to set up a plant means really that a lot of effort has to go into keeping the setup working appropriately, because this institute in NEOSHA, as they say, that takes care, of course, of respirators and everything, associated with oxygen, if that is the substance that we are talking about at this stage. And because of the hazards associated with excess oxygen for patients, they have set a lot of all these limits, the permissible exposure limit, the national toxicology, I should say limits, as well as there is a lot of information on the hazards associated, the short-term exposure limits, threshold limits, and they identify all of this even when they have to set up a plant, because for the workers also it has to be safe, because exposure can cause a lot of problems. And therefore, I think the government's initiative, more than setting up newer plants, would be to reinforce the plants that are already there by supporting them. But because Mangalore, Manipal, and all the regions in 2-3 districts actually need one, and we have industrial estates in these areas, it would be worthwhile to think of one with a low capacity. We don't need to think of a very high capacity, because storage is what is more important than the production. And therefore, if there is a consortium, even if it is, really cost intensive, and with government subsidy that can come in for the benefit of the government hospitals as well as the private hospitals, I think it would be worthwhile taking into consideration the setting up in the industrial estate, say in Baikampadi, a small plant, because other facilities are available there. But more importantly, the training of all the people who are going to be involved, just the way the national training is done for this. It is exactly like the NABL certifications, and therefore having the pipes in order, revisiting and auditing it frequently, all of this would be in place if the government really comes forward to set it up. That's all. Thank you. It is a very educative meeting.
Indrani, the safety issue, other day I saw one message where the cylinder used to fly like a missile, and you can perforate even the concrete ceiling.
Sure, sir. Yes, sir.
And transporting, I think that one more issue is the transporting continuously, because I know Ballari Steel Unit, we are very happy that they are converting their industrial oxygen to medical oxygen. See, other side we are losing, your steel manufacturing is suffering.
Yes.
And as our pulmonologist said, future, we don't know what is going to happen. It could be a bioterrorism, as he said. And are we prepared? I think we have to take it very seriously. This is going to be a big catastrophe, because we have ignored the oxygen. And it's a very important issue we are discussing today. Because suppose we are every oxygen demand, we are relying on Bellary or Gulbarga. And what is the fate of, because in Mangalore we are lucky, we are having 6 medical colleges, so many hospitals. Whatever remote areas like Mysore and places around Mysore.
Absolutely.
Actually, it's very far off. And if there is again, the electricity is a problem. Rainy season, there will be acute shortage of electricity. There may be power cuts. And generating oxygen may be difficult. In such situation, as you said, like Sriniketan may be knowing, they have created a huge storage of our petrol and diesel in Padu, you may be knowing, in lakhs of liters. In such is the situation, why can't you have emergency storage of oxygen? I don't know what is the safety features of this particular storage of oxygen, how long it can be stored. That part the experts should say. But definitely it's worthwhile looking into these issues. Thank you very much.
Yes, yes, indeed, sir. The gap analysis will have to be done, and to look at all the logistics of moving, which is a very important factor, as also all the problems associated with liquid oxygen, including frostbite, dizziness. There are so many things we often read, and when there was an ammonia leak in the plant that was there nearby, in Suratkal area, that there were so many people who became sick years ago. Of course, because there's going to be a problem, it's not as if we cannot begin, but so much of risk assessment, risk analysis and all will be done before maybe the government thinks of putting up a plant and reinforcing all the lost and difficult plants, which have gone to sleep for want of not being used, Thank you.
Can we take up this need-based or gap analysis of the region or in 2-3 districts at least? Shall we do that?
Yes, sir. Because
unless we do the need analysis and the logistics and supply line, that is we cannot.
For immediately what the government thought, there were Bhadravati plant was idle. And Raichur was available. In fact, Pollution Control Board chairman has given a direction to all the industries wherever nitrogen plants were there, they can convert easily for immediate need. Now, what we are thinking is a long-term plan, as you suggested. We have to do a gap analysis. Sir, as you rightly put it, we have to do the grid and storage and transportation wherever, like a pocket of medical colleges and hospitals and the patient load and other thing. I think as our joint director has put it, we will talk in terms of team, where a technical and as Madam has put it, some risk associated with this kind of plan. In fact, the principal of nursing college has been putting some questions. What she wants is some kind of a console or an app where immediately people can find out the beds as well as the oxygen requirement. So maybe we will take the lead and we will get associated with the joint director and also Mr. Punekar with respect to the safety aspect of transportation. Because today only I received a WhatsApp message where our LPG cylinders are going to be changed. They are going to come out with some composite layer where it will be lighter and it will be safer. And it cannot come out. So the technology has come to convert, because most of the time we come across this LPG cylinder blast and explosion in the houses. Similarly, these cylinder rules are there, cylinder safety rules are there in place. We will try to take all these precautions as our Honorable Vice Chancellor has put it. We will try to bring out some kind of a report where we will try to give it to the government, where a policy on this oxygen manufacture, transportation and utilization at the hospital we will prepare, and with the help of all of you. So if anybody wants to raise, they can answer. Otherwise, I have the honor of doing the vote of thanks also. First of all, my sincere thanks to our Honorable Vice Chancellor for sparing his valuable time and participating in this discussion, important aspect. Thank you very much, sir, for your participation and your suggestion. Then we have our external resource persons, Mr. Rathod. He is very, very busy person. I could catch him, make him to sit here because I know he is getting calls very often. Thank you very much, Sir Rathod, for your participation and suggestion. I also thank our Punekar sir for your participation, suggestion. We need more of your suggestion because you are a person with vast experience in design. As our Dr. Shripad has put it, whether we can go in for localized, small capacity and cost-effective manufacture of oxygen and transportation. So we need your support in your, because you have so much of experience in this Praxair and JSW. Thank you very much for your participation. My sincere thanks to Dr. Shripad Menadale and Dr. Giridhar, in spite of their very, very hectic schedule in treating patients on this COVID thing. In spite of that, when I requested them, I gave him only 2 days and requested them to participate. Sir, Dr. Shripad sir, thank you very much for your support. Thank you, sir. I also thank Dr. Giridhar for his participation and his important aspect of cautioning us on bioterrorism. Thank you for your words. I also thank Dr. Indrani, our members of the Institution Council, all others who participated in this panel discussion. As our Honorable Vice Chancellor has put it, we will work together, form some kind of a guideline and submit to the government early so that we will have a safe and so that this kind of catastrophic shortage of oxygen do not occur in the hospital. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.